Ladies and gentlemen, strap on in. We're going into another team breakdown, our fourth in this series. And oh boy, this one's going to be an absolute smashing team, as this is a team that did extremely well at Worlds in Fnatic. And oh boy, they have evolved their lineup considerably. In the top lane, they have Whippo. In the jungle, they have Selfmade. Mid lane is Nisky. And in the bot lane, we have Upset and Hylissang. Two new additions to this squad, of which we're going to get over to breaking down as players. But without further ado, let us go over our first player in this Fnatic lineup. Like normal, we start up in the top lane with the wide boy himself. It is Whippo, the emotional beast in the top lane, I would say is a good way to describe him. And he has been a very focal point in this Fnatic lineup. 2 years in a row, he's won the All-Stars 1v1 tournament in the LEC All-Stars event, as well as the World All-Stars event. And he is, as a player, very, very good at the top laning. He has some of the most unique picks in the top lane, like his Rengar, which he's brought out. And as a whole, he's been a very strong point of this Fnatic roster, even if in big games, I would say he kind of does show his nerves. Now, going over his skills that we are rating here, we've got his mechanics, his communication, and his 2020 achievements. We'll start off with the mechanical skills, and oh boy, you should probably know I'm going high considering how mechanically well he dominates 1v1 tourneys. So 4.5 for the Whippo Meister in that top lane, deserving of a high score for his role. One of the highest I'll probably give to top laners in the LEC this year, and as such, he's going to be able to continue his strength, I would say, against some of the other top laners in the league. As for his communication, we're going in very gung-ho here, as he is the emotion behind Fnatic. He drives them forward, bringing them confidence, bringing them this level of energy in a lineup that you need in order to continue to succeed. And as such, 4.3 for Whippo is the scoreline I'm going for here. And it is honestly one of the better scorelines that we're going to give for that in this team comp. And finally, 2020 accomplishment, or 2020 seasonal, i.e. summer, because that's realistically the only split that matters. 4.7. He did not win the LEC, but they qualified for Worlds, made it out of groups to the quarterfinals, and took top to the limit, but sadly falling short there, obviously. So the 4.7 and not any score lower than that is reasonable for this Fnatic lineup that stayed with the squad. Up next, we have a player who stepped up in the latter half of Summer Split, becoming the focal carry of the Fnatic roster in Selfmade. This guy kind of changed the meta in Europe, turning it from a jungler playing for his lanes to the lanes playing for the jungler. And Selfmade took that role to the extreme, picking up champs like Evelynn, Hecarim, and other carries along those routes to just absolutely smash all the opponents that he faced during the Summer Split and Worlds. And we kind of saw the extent of the carries that Selfmade learned at All-Stars just recently, picking up the likes of the Quiyana and champs that can go in the jungle, but we don't tend to see. Anyway, let us go over his stats, and we'll start with the mechanics here. I've gone in quite high, 4.7. We saw his mechanics start to shine as the split neared the end of its run, and this led to Selfmade defeating a lot of opponents off of his efforts and allowing Fnatic to continue off of this. Up next we have his communication, and to me feels like one of the more quieter players on this Fnatic roster, so I've gone in with a 3.9. He's a solid player overall who just can communicate as and when he needs to, what he's doing and where he is going. And finally, 2020 accomplishments, 4.7 here for the Polish jungler, and the reason being is it's the same as Whippo. They made it through Worlds to the quarterfinals, one of the only players that made it through to the quarterfinals from Europe, and as such he gets a very decent score. Next up we jump into our first new player on this Fnatic roster in Nisky. Coming over from Cloud9, he's going to fill a very important role that many people felt was a bit of an issue during the summer split, as Nemesis wasn't the sort of performing mid laner for this Fnatic lineup, but he then picked it up towards playoffs. But obviously Nisky's coming in, who missed out entirely on Worlds, and he plays a sort of similar role to what Caps does, in the fact that he plays for the team, and that is a huge aspect of why Fnatic picked him up, because they want to be using Selfmade as one of their main carries, and having a mid laner who plays more for the rest of the team instead of himself is a huge reason to pick him up as a player. Now, going over his stats, we start with a 4.3 for mechanics, and the reason it's not as high as the rest of the Fnatic squad is obviously he plays a different role to a normal player. He plays for others, and you don't need mechanics in too high to actually do that, but you obviously do need them to sort of achieve that role. That's why we've gone for this sort of scoreline. Over to communication, 3.2. I was going to go higher, but it's a different squad. It's a completely different environment to what he's used to at C9, and Nisky would obviously have a higher communication score from me if it weren't for the fact that he's coming over from NA to EU. It's a different play style over here, and obviously new season, new style as well with the item changes, so I kind of had to accommodate that into his scoreline. And lastly, for his 2020 success, I've gone with a 4. Now, he didn't make it to Worlds, granted, but he still made it through the playoffs, doing reasonably well, and you can't go higher or lower than that after considering the success of the spring split, pretty much decimating everyone that he came across, and then for the first half of the summer split doing the exact same. But as a player, Nisky is overall a very solid pickup for this Fnatic roster, and it's going to be interesting to see how he performs alongside this next guy. Speaking of that player, we might as well jump into his stats right now. It is Upset. This guy played exceptionally well on the Origin squad that floundered into 10th place alongside another player, but we don't get to talk about him in this episode or any episode in the LEC because he's not in the league anymore. Anyway, let's get over his stats, and Upset for me last summer split got a 5 for mechanics. He's not keeping that 5, let me tell you this. It's gone down to a 4.7. He is a very strong mechanical player, and as such, I feel that his stats still need to be very high, but obviously with how his team and he performed specifically in the summer split, I had to drop it at least by a few points here and there. As for communication, going in here with a 3.5, keeping it safe, but obviously he's a player who does aim for more mechanical skills instead of the communicate with the team aspect of the game, and as such I have to give him slightly higher in one side and slightly lower in the other, because he isn't the most perfect player obviously, and as such we see that with how his 2020 accomplishment stat is at a dead 1. Yeah, OG didn't do well, did they, in summer? So there's that, and that's a pretty good score overall for a player who finished on a 10th place squad. And our last player to cover in this video is the most aggressive, most insane support in the LEC. Reminds me of my own playstyles when I'm playing support in ranked, just going gung-ho, suiciding in plays, you know, that sort of thing. Going 1, 16 and 8. But this is Hylissang. He is probably one of the best supports in the league, and I'm honestly surprised that people don't recognize him for that. Anyway, let's get into his stat line, starting off with his mechanics. He's getting a very high mechanical skill, 4.3, and you're probably wondering, why are you giving a player that just goes in whenever and wherever such a high score? It's a part of his style, I would say. He goes very aggressive because it's sort of sometimes a bait. Like, he tries to lure people into false sense of security, like, oh, Hylissang's just gonna go in and fight whenever he can. And it allows junglers and other people collapsing in to come down without any worry of the opposition knowing that there's someone there, because he's always fighting. He pulls people in to a fight and they don't know. Anyway, next stat on the list is communication. Going in with a 4, and he's absolutely good at communicating, because with Reckless as his lane partner, they were a very unbeatable bot lane, and as such, they decimated top in 3 games of that best of 5. And to do that against the likes of Jagiellov, who is a world champion, it is a huge thing to accomplish, and as such, the Fnatic bot laner needs to be feared, and as such, you know this when you see his seasonal scoreline at a 4.7 for 2020. So, as the LEC leaderboard loads up for the very next time, we start with Fnatic joining these 3 teams already on here, and believe it or not, we've got another left side team here, as I've gonna stuck Fnatic in second yet again. Why have I put them in second? Well, I expect them to be behind a certain team that we haven't got to yet in the series, and I feel that it's going to be a repeat of what's happened every single time we get to the grand finals of the LEC. It's going to be a so close but so short situation, and Fnatic are going to falter from time to time. They do, however, have a more assured team in my opinion. This squad is very strong. They have a set playstyle that's quite noticeable with how they've brought in these players, and I'm honestly really looking forward to seeing if Fnatic can continue to rise as a squad, or they're going to falter and no one's going to expect it. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you guys next time, where we will be covering G2 Esports.